So the local authorities in the UK can now fine landlords thousands of pounds for not being fully compliant, for not giving requested documentation over to them fast enough. And in today's video, we're going to cover the new investigatory powers, compliance requirements, practical steps landlords should take to reduce getting these fines. So a little bit of background and context to today's video. So local authorities are gaining new powers, or have been gaining new powers from December 2025. And it's part of the Renters' Right Act. So these reforms basically aim to improve tenant protection and raise compliance standards across the private rented sector. In the past, landlords have been been labelled as, bad landlords, and so what they're trying to do now is just raise the standard in the private rented sector. So, and I would say the shift represents a move from reactive to proactive enforcement across the board. So, what powers do the council have? Well, they'll be able to request tenancy agreements whenever they want. They want proof of, deposits and where, you're keeping the deposits as a landlord. So the law is already anyway that you're meant to store and keep your tenant's landlord in a safety deposit. There are companies online that can keep it safe for you, but the councils can now request where it's being stored. Also safety certificates, the council can request that. So your gas, your electric, your so on and so forth, and rent records as well. They are allowed now to request all of this information from you as a landlord. They can set strict deadlines and inspect where records are stored. And if you don't comply, they can also seize digital devices to copy relevant files as well. So, these councils, or all councils now, have a lot more, power to request certain documentations. So for me, as I go through this video, but I'll say it now, it's all about making sure that you're compliant and you're treating your property portfolio as a professional business. Whether you've got one or whether you've got 15, you need to make sure that you're compliant and you've got all your ducks in a row. So if the council do request anything, it's not going to be a thing of where you're trying to be, reactive and trying to flap around and find things that they want because you haven't got it stored or you haven't got all your ducks in a row. You want to make sure that you're prepared and you're doing things correctly from this day forward. So here are a few more documentations that that they can request. It could be tenancy agreements or contracts. As I said before, your gas and your safety certificates. Also your EPC records. So you need to make sure that you've got an EPC certificate and it's up to date, it's in date. Proof of deposit protection, as I said before. Financial documentation such as rent logs, invoices, and inventories may also be required to support investigations if for whatever reason you're under investigation, And also, councils will be able to review up to 12 months of historical compliance. So this means documentation and safety records from 2025 may be examined during enforcement activities in 2026. So landlords must maintain organised records over time. So for me, listening to this video is not to scaremonger anybody. This video is simply just to build awareness. Me personally, seeing all of these things that the councils are doing and the government are doing, it doesn't affect me because I've always done things properly. And my properties that I rent out, I don't manage myself. I use reputable management companies who are have to be compliant anyway because it's their business, you know. But it's just for me now to make sure that I've got everything backed up, stored in terms of documentation, certifications, and things like that. So if they are requested, I can just produce it without any stress or delay for the council. And in a bit of a nutshell, you know, the Renters' Right Act underpins these changes. So its purpose is to provide stronger tenant protection and consistent standards across the private rental sector. While much of the Act rolls out through 2026, enforcement powers are among the earliest and the most impactful changes for us as landlords. So, it is a little bit, daunting for some. As I said, this video is not to scaremonger, but it is a bit daunting for some. But it's just, something you've got to roll with the punches, And if you're a professional landlord, which I'm sure you are, or want to get into property and be a professional landlord, this will not and should not hinder your progress. So what are the consequences if we're not compliant and we're not, forthcoming with documentation if it's requested? Well, councils can impose fines and civil penalties for non-compliance. Serious breaches may lead to rent repayment orders of up to 24 months. So that's something to be mindful of. And landlords also face reputational risks that can affect business viability and tenant relationships, which is, very, very true. I always harp on about this. I've been taught it and I'll share it with you guys. You have to treat your portfolio like a professional business because it is business. You're making, hopefully you're making money on a monthly basis. So it's a business. You got to pay your taxes on your property income. So treat it like a professional business. And if you're treating it like a professional business, you'll be compliant, you'll have all your certification, and you won't have any issues with the local authorities in the areas that you're renting your property in. So things to look out for as a landlord. Local authorities now have more resources and legal tools to initiate investigations. So instead of waiting for tenant compliance, councils can proactively inspect and audit documentation. Failures in compliance could become more costly than ever before. So it's all about making sure that you're compliant. They can now, most things are digital now. So they can write to you or write to your tenant or write to the management company and say, I need to see the EPC rating and the gas certificate today. And hopefully your management company yourself can just ping it straight over to them. No issues there, So I've put together a little, I've called it compliance preparation steps. So landlords should adopt disciplined record keeping practices. If you don't, I would highly suggest you start. So verifying licensing obligations to ensure your gas, your electric and your EPC requirements are up to date. Regular compliant audits help to identify issues before enforcement occurs, which is very, very important. And I would say, like I said before, professional lettings agents and advisors should be assisting with this anyway, to be honest, and should have all the details because they are legally not allowed to rent out your property or your property on your behalf if these things aren't in place anyway. So it's something that you just need to be made aware of, and just to make sure that you've got all of these things ready to go. If you manage property yourself, if you manage your portfolio yourself, I would suggest not to, but if that's something that you do, you need to make sure that all of these things are ready and are up to date. So looking to 2026, these enforcement changes are part of a broader drive just to standardise private renting. So the government and local authorities are expected to continue strengthening enforcement capacity and updating regulations and making compliance a long-term requirement. I personally think that this is good. I think, it will force all landlords, all people that rent out properties to be more professional, give us a better name, and the standard across the board, across the whole of the UK, is naturally going to lift. And the not so good landlords, the ones that don't want to be compliant, that don't keep up with the things that they need to keep up with, they'll just leave the markets and hopefully want to sell quickly. And the likes of us can be buying it off them below market value because they want to get out as quick as possible, So, in summary, the enforcement landscape for the UK is changing significantly, for sure. Stronger council powers, as I've explained in this video, increased penalties that we've never seen before. And there's going to be proactive investigations, which will require landlords to be more organised, more compliant, and I would say to prepare now will reduce financial and operational risks in the future, So really hope you've enjoyed today's video. This is just a heads up. It's something where we just have to just make sure that we're compliant, make sure that our certifications are all up to date, and we're giving our tenants a really good service. Treat it like a business. We're professional people. Treat it like a business. We'll have no problems whatsoever. Again, I've been Craig Parker. Really hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again next time.